Hello. I haven't watched that much anime in the last week because, what happened last weekend was the Bojack Horseman Season 5 came out, and I'm a big fan of that. I could do a video on that or an article, I might do that, because I'm a fan of, escapism in many forms, which includes literature, video games, Western animation, and anime. So, I tend to focus on anime in my blog. It's sort of my niche, but I also like talking about other things. What I've been listening to lately today was some criticisms about Star Wars The Last Jedi, for example, and how that could have been better. I am interested in talking about how Bojack Horseman ended, but no spoilers. I'm not going to get into that here. What I'm working on with my blog right now in terms of talking about anime is that I'm doing a list of the best of the romance genre. I recently finished Violet Evergarden, and I'll talk about that more, but I thought that was just okay, so I did a review about that. And I'm trying to do a top 25 or so best romance anime of all time. Spoiler alert, Violet Evergarden, probably not going to make that list. I don't know, but there's not that many great romance anime either. Some of my favorite romance anime include His and Her Circumstances, Maid-sama, let's see, Peach Girl, Fruits Basket. Trying to think what else. I don't watch that much romance. Spice and Wolf is probably my all-time favorite. So I'll be talking about that. With Violet Evergarden, it's kind of, we discussed this in my anime group, and it's sort of just okay. There are certain flaws that I noticed that I talk about in my article, but overall I enjoyed the story. I found the characters to be interesting and likable and relatable, so it's got that going for it. I just kind of hoping for more. I have that problem with a lot of one-cour anime that are, the shorter anime that are like 10 to 13 episodes or so. It's really not enough time to show a very complete story. There are some anime that do this really well, but there are a lot of anime that don't really seem all that complete when they do the one core thing. I don't know if I'm saying that right or whatever, but, I kind of like anime movies that are just standalone movies, because I like something that is short and easy to understand and easy to digest because it's short. I have problems with the long-running shonen stories like Naruto and Bleach because I like them enough, sort of, and I've watched some episodes of them, but I'm never going to watch all those episodes, and I really liked Inuyasha, but I'm never going to watch all of Inuyasha. I mean, unless you guys dare me to, drink and watch it for a whole weekend, do a 72-hour Inuyasha marathon or something. Even then, even if I watched Inuyasha straight for, 72 hours, I don't know if I'd get through all of it, because there's also the movies and shit. There's a fly in my face. Anyway, so what I really like right now is Bojack Horseman. I really thought the last season of it was going to be disappointing, because how could they make a season as good as season 4 was, and how can they continue to be interesting? At some point I worry that the show is gonna stop being, as creative and original and funny as it was, and just kind of become mediocre. That sort of happened with Game of Thrones also, and I was a little disappointed. I think a lot of fans were by season 7 of Game of Thrones. Another trend I'm noticing in anime, and I've talked about this, is grim, dark versions of magical girl shows. The worst one recently, of course, is Magical Girl Sight, but there's been others, and there's this two mistaken ideas at play here with the creation of shows like this, and one is that a deconstruction or a subversion of a genre is enough to sell an anime, and the second thing is that all you need to do, the second mistaken idea that these people making these shows believe, is that all you need to do to deconstruct the magical girl genre is to present it in a darker and edgier way. And Magical Girl Side attempts to do this and fails, and it's not the only one. It's a trend, we're seeing with Magical Girl. But the Magical Girl genre, or the shoujo genre related genres, they weren't that. They had this. Outsiders looked at them as cutesy and girly in a negative way, like too happy. They thought they were maybe not edgy enough or not action-packed enough or something. But that's completely bogus, because, there was Revolutionary Girl Utena and Princess Tutu and Pre-Tier are just a few examples I tend to give. Later episodes of Sailor Moon also got pretty dark and edgy. There are characters that die in Sailor Moon, that they, So it's weird to say that a magical girl story having a dark tone, that's by itself enough for it to be subversive, which carries this connotation that it's new and different and really smart and really pushing the envelope and doing something different that other shows don't do. But it's not. A lot of these people are not doing anything new. And it's also not new to have a magical system that has consequences. Not even Madoka invented that, really. There were shows like Sailor Moon, of course, where using magic didn't have any real consequences other than you used it as a tool to defeat the enemies. But then you have things like Full Metal Alchemist is a good example of the alchemy in that world is like a magic system where the magic runs on equivalent exchange, and there's no real way to cheat the system. In fact, the main character's whole goal and motivation is that they're looking for a way to kind of like cheat the system, so to speak. But every way that you try to use alchemy is going to involve some kind of huge sacrifice, and I think that's an interesting part of Full Metal Alchemist, and that's what makes it so great. But so we have to look at like what Madoka did that was really new or innovative, because it wasn't being a sad magical girl, and it wasn't having a magical system where there are more realistic consequences for using magic, sort of likened to the use of electricity in the real world. But trying to figure out what sets Madoka apart is kind of tricky. I kind of like the time travel aspect of it. I like Homura's arc. That's what really made the story cool for me, was there were some episodes that I watched in the middle that were just, okay. And then I thought it was okay, but really it's the end of Madoka that makes it cool. Seeing, not the very end, but the part where you see Homura and how she went back in time all these different times, and she really struggled to it was kind of like playing a video game over and over again, Homura was just, when you see that struggle to get to her happy ending, and that really makes it worth it, and that makes the climax of the anime seem really cool, but also really sad for Homura, and that's kind of why you see the Rebellion movie making sense, because the ending of Madoka, doesn't really give Homura the satisfaction and what she thinks she deserves. And it doesn't technically fulfill the exact words of her wish, which is kind of interesting because she wished to be the one to protect Madoka. Madoka's wish is what ends up protecting her from both becoming a witch and from Walpurgis Night. But Homura was the one who wanted to do that, and that was, her wish was selfish in a sense that she wanted to be Madoka's savior and hero, and she didn't get to be that by the end of the series. That's kind of what's really interesting, is you have a character who wants to save this distressed damsel character, basically, but the damsel ends up saving themselves. That is a little bit of a subversion. But yeah, no, I'd really like to see fewer anime that are trying to subvert tropes for the sake of it, and I just got done watching a Digibro video about how this is working in the shonen genre with, say, One Punch Man or Hunter x Hunter. When people talk about those, they'll be like, oh, it's great because it's subverting shonen tropes. Well, how? And what does that mean? And no, it's not. So it's interesting to talk about subversion and deconstruction because a lot of people tend to assume it means a smarter anime or a better anime, and it really doesn't. And a lot of anime that we think of as deconstructions or subversions can be considered straight examples of the same tropes. If you think about it, it really depends on how you think about them, and it's really subjective. So yeah, there's that. So right now, I don't know if I mentioned it in my last week's video, but I'm watching Happy Sugar Life, and I'll probably talk about that next week because I haven't finished it yet. I don't know if it is finished yet or what, or how many episodes are left, but it's near the end, and it's kind of interesting because right now I'm writing a nonfiction book about lolicon, and the reason I'm writing it as a nonfiction book instead of blog articles is because hub pages won't let me write about that kind of stuff, like any 18 plus related topic. I can't write about it on hub pages or the articles will get demonetized. So as far as that goes, I'm really interested in like lolicon as a phenomenon within anime fandom. Not really a fan of it myself, but I kind of am interested in why other people are fans of it and what its existence even means. Why is it more acceptable in anime to kind of fetishize girls at a younger age than in Western media? You tend to only sexualize or romanticize girls a little bit older. Usually around 15 or 16 is when they start seeing girls, when they've reached the later stages of puberty, then the media thinks it's okay to sexualize them. In Western culture, in Japanese culture, it can be when they're a little bit younger, and that's interesting, and it's a cultural difference that I want to understand more, so that's what I'm exploring with my book. And it's called Understanding Lolicon. It should come out in October if I get off my ass and do some actual writing. Fingers crossed. Yeah. Okay. So I'm working on that. I'm gonna do this. I'm working on a screenwriting contest, and I'm also working on a fictional novel. So I'll talk about those more as I get closer to completing them. But the lolicon book, Understanding Lolicon, it's just going to be a short, kind of 20,000 or 30,000 word, little nonfiction book that I'm going to sell as an ebook on Amazon instead of making it, like I said, otherwise I would talk about the topic on hub pages, and I can't really do that, so not the way I would like. I would have to do a lot of self-censoring, and I don't want to do that. If you're really going to authentically talk about this topic as a cultural phenomenon, you're going to talk about the porn, too. I mean, the porn is an aspect of lolicon fandom. It's not the only aspect, and lots of people are fans of moe, and fans of lolicon, I would say the majority of them don't see it as a sexual thing, but you can't honestly talk about this topic without talking about the people for who it is a fetish, for who it is pornographic. And I'm kind of frustrated with the fact that Google Ads won't let you talk about something like that at length in a blog, and because adults read articles on the internet too. I don't understand why Google wants me to hold my articles to some standard of like a G or PG rated movie when I'm primarily targeting adults as my audience for readers. I mean, maybe teenagers too, but teenagers who are mature enough to understand sexual topics. I'm not targeting with my target audience does not consist of anyone who's too, like, emotionally immature to talk about topics of a sexual nature, you know. But isn't mature anime fan an oxymoron? Okay. So that's kind of what's going on with me right now. I want to talk about Happy Sugar Life later and how I really see it as an interesting, it's deconstructing lolicon, or kind of parodying, making fun of lolicon, because you have these characters that obsess over this little girl, and for me, deconstruction means it shows the real world consequences of a given trope. So it's showing the real world consequences of treating a real little girl the way you would treat a loli character in an anime. And it's talking about kind of like, it's commentary about the way obsessive anime fans treat their favorite characters. And so if you haven't seen it, I think it's on Amazon, and it's about this deranged pink-haired teenage girl who kidnaps a younger girl who's like maybe 8, 9, or 10, I don't know exactly, and keeps her in an apartment and locks her up in there, and it's really creepy, and she is madly in love with this little girl, and that's kind of surprising and weird. And then there's this other character who they introduced this character's the little girl's missing, and she's got this older brother who's out on the streets looking for her, and they both were escaping from like an abusive household, and the brother, you know, has to find his sister, because that's like all the desire to find her is like all that keeps him going, even though it's so hard for him to be homeless and to have escaped that situation. That's interesting. And then you have this blonde boy that's like obsessed with the missing girl. He sees her wanted posters all over town that the brother put up, and he takes them down and he puts them up in his room, and he obsesses over her almost like she's kind of a deity to him, you know, and it's very creepy. But you also see that like there's this kind of purity in their obsession that makes the characters kind of interesting. I wouldn't say endearing, but something close to that. And it's weird how they can have a scene in Happy Sugar Life that can feel very romantic and sweet, and then you remember what kind of show it is, and then you remember how creepy it actually is, and they're able to trick you. And I think that's some clever a clever thing on the part of the creators, that they're able to do that. Like, they create these characters that are memorable and interesting and likable, but the main character at least does horrible things. So it's kind of interesting like that. I don't know, because not a lot of creators can pull off the idea of getting you to like a character that sucks morally, and I haven't seen anything that good really since Death Note. I mean, where you get a character who is literally a serial killer, but you still kind of root for them. Breaking Bad is kind of like that too. Like, you have your main character who's an asshole, a drug lord, but and he kills people or has people kill people and stuff and threatens people, but you still kind of root for him and you kind of hate the people that he's up against. So that is really brilliant writing when you have a character that does bad things and remains sympathetic to the audience. I think that's cool writing. So I'm gonna watch the end of Happy Sugar Life sometime soon, and I'll talk more about that when I've seen the end of it. Violet Evergarden, I've watched it. It was just okay. Bojack Horseman Season 5, I watched that, and it was really good. And I don't want to talk about it because some people haven't seen it yet, so wait a little bit, maybe do a review of that, But it was a really good season. Alright. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Bye.